In this next set of videos, we're going to be talking about the bureaucracy. Um, After these lecture videos are over, you'll be able to explain what the bureaucracy is and what it does. You'll be able to identify some of the executive departments, agencies, and bureaus, but I'm going to be focusing on the federal government, not on the state government, although I'll talk a little bit about that. You'll be able to explain the role of a government corporation. You'll be able to explain the significance of rulemaking authority, or what's also called administrative law. And this is why the bureaucracy, by the way, is so important. And then later on, we'll talk about the difference between political appointees and civil servants who are part of the bureaucracy. And you'll also be able to identify two reasons why bureaucracies are absolutely essential in a political system. So we're going to start off by talking about what is a bureaucracy, and what I want to do is I want to start off by telling you a story, like I'm sort of prone to do. So my neighbor who used to live across the street was somebody who worked for the Army Corps of Engineers, which is part of the Department of Defense, which is part of the bureaucracy. And he and I were talking one day in the middle of the street, and at one point he started railing about bureaucrats this and bureaucrats that and how bad the bureaucracy was. And so I said to him, I said, Steve, I said, you're a bureaucrat. And he looked at me like I had just called him a name, which I don't want to say in the video because then it'll be on YouTube and there'll be videos of me saying over and over again. So anyways, so he looked at me like I just called him a name and he started getting mad at me. And I said, no, Steve, don't, you got me all wrong. I'm a bureaucrat too. Like you get paid by the Department of Defense. I get paid by the state of California, or more specifically, I get paid by the Santa Clarita Community College District, right? We're both bureaucrats. Well, he wasn't satisfied with that. And probably to the extent that you've ever thought about bureaucracies or the word bureaucrat, you probably don't think about them very positively. Sometimes words have what are called emotional tags, like it can be a positive, a good tag, a good feeling that goes along with it. It can be a bad tag or a bad feeling. Well, bureaucracy or bureaucrat has a negative emotional tag for most people, and there's a reason for that. That I'm not going to get into until maybe later. But for our purposes, since what we're trying to do is understand political science or American government through the lens of political science, I want to go ahead and take the emotional tag off of bureaucracy or off of bureaucrat. It's not an insult. A bureaucracy is a job description. So let's get started. What is a bureaucracy? A bureaucracy are just non-elected officials who are responsible for implementing policies. So there's a federal bureaucracy. So if there's a federal policy that has to be implemented or carried out, then that happens at the federal bureaucracy does that. But there's a state bureaucracy, there's a city bureaucracy as well. But as I said, we're going to focus on the federal government. And so this is the way it works. Congress writes a bill, right? We've gone through that already. And then at some point that bill becomes a law. And as we know, as I've said repeatedly throughout the course of these lecture videos, it's the job of the president to execute the law, to faithfully carry out the law as passed by Congress. So Congress writes the bill becomes a law. The president executes the law, but the president doesn't do the work himself, obviously, right? He's not carrying out the law himself, like there's the president over there carrying out the law. No, he assigns that work to other people. Other people do the work of carrying out the laws, and depending on what the law is, that'll shape who's carrying out the law. Well, the people in the bureaucracy are the people who do the work. They're the ones who actually do the carrying out of the law. They're the ones who do, they're the ones who do the stuff make these laws happen. So for example, if there's a federal law that's passed, it has to do with safety on job sites. There's an organization within the Department of Labor called the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. Some of you have probably on your jobs, depending on what you do, encountered OSHA, right? Right? They're the ones, if the federal government passes a law that has to do with safety on job sites, the president's going to give that law to the Secretary of Labor, the head of the Department of Labor. The head of the Department of Labor is going to give it to the people who head up OSHA, and they're going to say, hey, do this thing that Congress just passed. If there's a law that has to be passed dealing with public health, right, that might be something that's carried out by the Center for Disease Control or the Food and Drug Administration. And the people who actually carry it out are the people who work there for them. So for as far as the Food and Drug Administration, right, they're the ones who approve whether or not vaccines to deal with COVID are acceptable, right? They're the scientists who work for them. They're the ones who do the testing. Those are bureaucrats. So the people who work in the bureaucracy are called bureaucrats. And oftentimes, like I say, people talk about the bureaucracy like in the most insulting terms. Bureaucrat is not a four-letter word. It's a job description. And so as we approach this topic of the bureaucracy and the bureaucrats, I want to tear off the emotional tag. It's a job description. It's an important job. And we want to approach it in this sort of neutral way in order to have a better understanding of the bureaucracy and why it's important. Now, before I go on to the part of the bureaucracy that sort of explaining the structure of it, let's talk for a second about the emotional tag. The thing about the bureaucracy is kind of like airplanes. Now you're probably wondering, like, what do you mean it's like airplanes, Phil? Well, here's the thing. If an airplane takes off, flies to its destination, and lands, nobody notices. As a matter of fact, that happens thousands and thousands of times each day. Planes take off, they land, nobody notices. It's the same thing with the It's the same thing with the bureaucracy. When the bureaucracy does their job, nobody notices. For example, the food. Much of the food that we buy at the grocery store gets inspected by people within the bureaucracy, like the meat gets inspected by the USDA, right? Different organizations that look over the food that we eat to ensure that the food supply is safe. And so if you go buy a steak, for those of you who are meat eaters, if you go buy a steak and you grill it up and you eat it and it's delicious, nobody sits around and says, here, a toast to the bureaucracy, to the bureaucrats. Well done. You eat your steak and you're done. Right? If you buy a salad, those pre-bagged salads, you make a salad, put in the dressing, boom, eat it. Nobody toasts the bureaucracy. But if somebody gets salmonella poisoning, if somebody winds up getting sick, if a whole lot of salad has to be brought back or recalled because it turns out that there was some sort of disease in there and people are getting sick, then people notice the bureaucracy. When the bureaucracy fails and doesn't do its job, everybody notices. The other reason that people have a negative tag to this word bureaucracy is because most of the time when we're interacting with the bureaucracy, it's not always a pleasant experience. Like the DMV. I mean, my mom used to work for the DMV, so I have a different take on the DMV. But for most people, when you walk into the DMV, you kind of get the feeling they don't really care about how quickly they serve you. I know one time I went to the Social Security Administration. This is a true story, and I'll keep it short so this video isn't too long. If you don't want to hear another dumb Phil story, you can just stop this and go to the next video. So I go into the Social Security Administration. There's a whole bunch of chairs. I lost my Social Security card. I need to get a new one. There's a whole bunch of chairs, and there's literally a family sitting there. I think there were 4 people and me. And all around there, like windows and people sitting at windows doing some things. There's this one family and there's me and a bunch of empty chairs. And so I sit there for a while and I'm looking around and I'm waiting. And finally, somebody looks up from their little window and they motion me over. So I'm like, hey, well, I think I cut in front of these people. But I walk up and I say, yeah. And I start to explain what I'm there for. And they say, you have to get a number. Seriously. There's a little one of those things where you have to pull off a tab to get a number when you go in. And so I had to go walk over, like I was just aghast. And I was thinking, like, this is going to be in a lecture video. Walked over, I got my number, I sat back down, and then like 2 minutes later, somebody rang my number 12, and I was able to go up. So a lot of times we encounter the bureaucracy in what I'll call frustrating circumstances. And that's another reason there's an emotional tag. But the thing is once again, if I were to walk into the Social Security Administration or into the DMV, and I get in line and everything happens just exactly the way it's supposed to, and I'm in and out of there, I don't go home and say a toast to the bureaucracy, yay to bureaucrats. We notice the bureaucracy when they don't do their job. And when they do their job, they're invisible. Okay, and there's countless numbers of ways that this is true. When planes take off and land, milk, when we drink it, meat, when we eat it, when freeways don't collapse, when buildings don't collapse, just the water you drink is good. The sewers don't clog up. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. And then we'll move on to the more boring parts of the bureaucracy, the organization, which I'll talk about in the next video.